Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Today,
April the 2nd, 2025, the Switch 2 Direct. Everybody waited with bated breath for Nintendo to announce basically everything that I thought they were going to announce. I said before we watched it on live stream, I was concerned about Nintendo's position in the market, and moreover, I was concerned about what added value the Nintendo Switch 2 could bring to the market. Now I'm a skeptic. Naturally, you've seen my videos, but there was part of me that really wanted to believe that Nintendo were going to come out of the gate at this Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, and they were going to bring me something that I just haven't thought of. They were going to go, this is why you should own the Nintendo Switch 2. And as unlikely as it seemed, Nintendo have done this time and again. But I thought, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Nintendo. They have rocked the boat so many times and successfully. It's kind of astonishing how many times Nintendo have come out of left field with a completely crazy idea and changed the hearts and minds of gamers, and people have gone, actually, this is fucking dope. I mean, the first time I personally remember Nintendo kind of shaking up the market was back in 2001. I was like 11 years old. But they released the Nintendo GameCube, and the Nintendo GameCube was directly competing with the PlayStation 2 at the time. And the PlayStation 2 cost like £300. It was impossible to convince my mum to get me a PlayStation 2, even though I did in the end. But the Nintendo GameCube launched as a competitor at just £129. Now, I know that's not some crazy hardware thing, but it was still a big shock to the market at the time. The Nintendo Wii, what the fuck was that? I remember when that thing was being announced and just kind of being like, who the fuck is gonna buy and play that? Well, turns out literally over 100 million people. One of the most successful consoles of all time. The DS and the 3DS. Who knew anyone would want a handheld with two screens? Who knew anyone would want that fake ass weird 3D thing that they introduced on a handheld? The literal best-selling handheld console of all time. And then, of course, the Nintendo Switch, a dockable hybrid home/handheld console. Nintendo have got this really, really excellent ability to look at the market, see what's going on, and pinpoint a niche that's not happening, and breathe life into that niche and create something that everybody wants a piece of. Now, everything that we've seen already from the Nintendo Switch 2 before this Direct had me thinking, well, is that enough? There must be something more about the Nintendo Switch 2 that we don't know, that they're holding back and saving for this Nintendo Direct. Because even the Wii U, which totally flopped, ended up being the basis for the idea of the Switch. HD resolution, and the gamepad with the screen on it. So what is going to be the big leap from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2? And that is the thing that I was hoping to see today. And so people might suggest, why do Nintendo need to do that? Look how unbelievably successful the Nintendo Switch has been. And I guess the point is that the market has changed a lot over the last 5 years, certainly over the last 8 years since the Switch came out, and therefore the concept that the Nintendo Switch leans on is no longer a fresh idea. It's no longer something that people are going to go, I need a taste of that, I want a piece of that action, because people have already fucking got it. People already have it at home right now on the Nintendo Switch. So without the Nintendo Switch 2 having some big conceptual change to it, means that Nintendo are A, chasing their own tail, and B, also now competing with all of the fresh competition that's in the market based on what they originally did. So the Steam Deck saw what the Switch was doing and went, we're going to make a PC version of that. We're going to make a handheld PC that you can dock if you want to and have that running on your big screen. The Lenovo Legion went even further than that and has the Joy-Cons that you can take off. Then the other thing that the Switch really had going for it was the handheld capabilities. The fact that at the time we were in the PlayStation 4/Xbox One era. Up until that point, we didn't really have a handheld console that was able to play console games. If you had a handheld console like the DS or the PS Vita, the titles that were coming out on those consoles were specifically built for those consoles and for the hardware capabilities that were available on them. What the Switch allowed for, really the first time in history, at least in a commercially accessible way, was for games from the 7th and 8th generation, so the Xbox 360, the PS3, and then some from the Xbox One and the PS4, to be available to play on a handheld console, which certainly during the peak of my Nintendo Switch playing era was the main reason I was using it. Because on an evening, if we were downstairs watching the TV, hanging out in the living room, or for that hour when you're in bed before you go to sleep, I could play some quality AAA titles on a handheld device. Well, now I can do that shit basically anywhere. With Game Pass Cloud, I can do that on my phone if I wanted to. With the Steam Deck, I can do it with much newer games with higher graphical capabilities. And the good thing about the Steam Deck is I can buy those games at the prices that they're on Steam for, which is a damn sight cheaper than what Nintendo sells games for. For example, The Witcher 3 on the Nintendo Switch, for some reason, is a big deal, even though the game came out 10 years ago. So to get that on the Nintendo Switch, that's going to run you up 50 quid. If you buy it on Steam at full price, it's going for 25 quid. That's half the price. Plus, when that game goes on sale on Steam, you can pick it up for like 6 quid. So the point I'm making there is that video games over the last 8 years since we got the Nintendo Switch 1 have become a lot more readily available and a lot more accessible for everyone. That's the way that the market is moving. You know, I'm not happy about it, but we're moving away from physical games. We're moving into this digital era. And what that's allowing is for people to be able to access games everywhere. You can access games on your phone, you can access games on Game Pass built into your TV, you can access it on your PC, you can access it on your laptop, you can access it on whatever handheld devices you own. You can even access games on Netflix now. So the novelty of not being locked into a console and being able to lift the Nintendo Switch off the console and go play elsewhere is not a new concept anymore. And nor is the novelty of being able to play high-end console games in handheld form. Those were my worries, basically, about what Nintendo's added value thing was going to be to the market in the Nintendo Switch 2. And did they do it? No, not at all, unfortunately. I'm not looking to just totally shit on the Nintendo Switch 2, because one thing that Nintendo will always have is the Nintendo IPs. Nintendo is a legendary part of the gaming sphere, and at least for the foreseeable, you will only be able to play Nintendo games on your Nintendo console. So that in itself is a reason to purchase this console, because certainly as time goes on, you know, within the next 5 years, we'll be expecting to see a new 3D Mario. We'll be expecting to see the next iteration of the Zelda game. The whole world will be expecting to see what Animal Crossing does next. And those in their own right will shift large quantities of this hardware device. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that at some point I'm going to end up picking one of these up myself. But the problem that I have with all of this that got announced, it's just like this unwavering, relentless commitment to bring us things that already exist elsewhere, and in some cases, better versions of. It's the complete opposite of what I would expect from a Nintendo announcement of a new console. Okay, so the first thing is the handheld screen, which is going to be 1080p at 120 Hz. Now, this is a good thing. 1080p on a 7.9-inch screen, which is also an improvement in size from the Nintendo Switch 1, by the way. That's going to look great. A screen of that size, outputting 1080p, fantastic. That's a higher resolution than the Steam Deck output in handheld mode. It's a higher resolution than the OG Switch. So while it's a step up in improvement, but the thing is, most of your mobile phones already output at that. If you have one of the newer phones, you're probably outputting at 4K QHD on a tiny screen. Then we found out that the screen itself is going to be an LCD screen with HDR support. Now, this really confused me. I've got to be honest with you. Nintendo just not long ago released the OLED model of the Nintendo Switch, and they were bigging up how fucking good this screen was going to be and how good it looked. So why, for the Nintendo Switch 2, which is a more advanced console, costs a lot more, are we going backwards? Nintendo offered a bit of clarity on that in their Ask the Developers section on the new website, and it was something along the lines of they put lots of thought into the decision, and LCD screens have come a long way since the decision to go OLED for the Switch OLED model. Well, that may be the case, but OLED's still better. The real reason is probably two things. One, it's cheaper. They're trying to keep the cost down on the console. Two, they're going to release an OLED model in a few years' time, right? It just seems shady. Guys, you won't believe it. They have added an extra USB-C port on the top. I'm happy about it. I'm excited. Like, that's a good thing. I remember when they first announced that, I was like, oh, there's a USB-C port on the top. That's fucking awesome. But then on reflection, I'm like, That should always have been the case. 256 gigabytes of internal storage rather than the 32 gigabytes we were given on the Nintendo Switch. Improvement, yes. 4 times bigger. But what are the caveats? What's the hidden truth behind that? Well, obviously it's still an improvement, but you know, games are bigger now. And if they're going to be creating games that support 4K output when in docked mode, which is something we'll talk about shortly, the games are naturally going to have to be bigger. So whereas games were anything between 15 and 30 gigabyte for a big game on the Nintendo Switch, you're probably looking between 30 and 60 gigabyte now. So 256 gig actually is still pretty small, but that's fine because we get the SD card slot like we did in the Nintendo Switch 1. So you can add your own micro SD into there, right? Kind of. So regular micro SDs will no longer work on the Nintendo Switch 2. Now you have to have micro SD express cards. And this is because they have like a faster read and write, I believe, or that's at least what Nintendo said. But of course, the problem with that, which I shouldn't need to tell you, is that that's going to cost more. Also, the SD card that you have currently in your Nintendo Switch with all of those fucking games on it is essentially useless now. We're getting an audio upgrade to 3D audio. Again, it's nice to see the improvement happening, but it's not fresh tech. They've improved the built-in stand so it's bigger and more sturdy and isn't that little flimsy bit of plastic that broke off everyone's Switch 1. They have a new and improved dock which allows you to, when docked, play games in 4K at 60 frames per second with HDR as well, so better color settings. And the dock has a built-in fan to keep that Nintendo Switch console running cool whilst docked. So yeah, so you know, a couple more small improvements there, but it's like all this stuff is already out there existing elsewhere. Where's that world beater? Where's that thing that's going to revolutionize it and change things? Maybe it's in the Joy-Cons. So the Joy-Cons magnetically attached to the console. I do think that's cool. We've got larger trigger buttons when you're using it in that kind of small mode, which is much better because they were fucking tiny on the Nintendo Switch. And obviously you had that little attachment that you could put on the Nintendo Switch to make them bigger, but who the fuck didn't lose them? Larger left and right sticks. Decent enough addition. And wait, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the thing. The Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons can be used as a mouse. Here we fucking go. Game changer. Never seen that done before. And the thing is as well, some of the ways that they were using it, like the wheelchair basketball game where you were like stabbing it forward to roll the wheels, like they've totally missed the point there on like why a mouse could be useful. You know, the benefit of having a mouse is for the movement. It's so that it feels like, you know, it's like you're playing it on a PC. If I was playing that wheelchair basketball game on the PC, I would fully be expecting to use WASD as my movement and the mouse as the fucking aim control or whatever. This whole like stabbing the thing forward as if I'm wheeling the wheels, like that's not what I want the mouse for. Oh my god, and the C button. The C button. They made such a big fucking deal out of this new chat button. Look, I know they've done some stuff to kind of try and make it run like Discord, but do you know what Xbox and PlayStation did? They just integrated Discord. The Xbox 360 launched in 2005, 20 years ago, with Party Chat. 20 years ago. This whole screen sharing functionality and stuff on it, like, it's just, I don't get it. I don't get it. And like, why are they going up with that trailer as well? Like, look at how fucking bodged that screen sharing looks. Nobody wants to watch that. Nobody wants to watch that at that frame rate. If that was on Discord streaming that way, people would be blowing up Discord support saying there's something fucking wrong. Like, look, I'm trying, like, I know I'm sounding like super sour and super bitter about all this, but like, I'm not upset that these things exist. I just can't believe that this is what we're trying to sell the console on. These are all things we totally expect already. And some of them, we kind of expect them in different ways. Like, why not just put Discord on your fucking console? Why have we got to do this fucking, your version of Discord? And then in order to integrate it properly, we're no doubt going to have to buy this camera. That's going to run you up like 50 quid. There doesn't seem to be any information out there yet as to whether you can just use your own camera. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So with that, we get a built-in microphone that's on top of the console. The mic will apparently have noise cancelling technology. Again, you can share your gameplay in chat, but it looks dog. There was some cool-ish features surrounding the camera that looked a bit Nintendo-esque. Like you can have your camera integrated into certain games. And there's parental controls for all this via the Nintendo app. Now, I'm not going to talk about games in this video. If I get time, I plan to do a separate video on the games because there's a bunch to talk about there as well. So just to wrap this one up, we need to talk about the pricing of the console. Because that's it. There's nothing more to come. No innovating, game-changing technology this time around by the looks of it, unfortunately. And all of that hardware that we've just talked about can be purchased for the price of £395 in the UK, or £429.99 with Mario Kart World included. It ain't cheap, guys. It ain't cheap at all. Technically, it's still cheaper than a PlayStation 5, but a PlayStation 5 is a PlayStation 5. And when you think about what we've been talking about in this video, about the kind of leaps forward in technology or the market niche game changers that Nintendo have always been known for, the original Nintendo Switch being one of those, well, that launched for £275 in the UK. Do I think that £400 for a console is unreasonable? No. But do I think that £400 for what essentially looks to me like a Nintendo Switch Pro? Yeah, I think it's a bit on the steep side, I have to be honest with you. Especially when you're charging what you're charging for the games. And we'll save that for another video. Anyway, that's my initial thoughts on the hardware of the Nintendo Switch 2. Like I said, hopefully going to do a video on the games as well, so keep an eye out for that. I want to know what you guys think. Is all of this unjustified? Do you have a different opinion? Please let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.